Good morning. First of all, let me welcome all of you to the IMB campus. You've already had a glimpse of it, I'm sure, as you came in. I'm happy to say that we do our best to keep the campus sustainable and green. You might have seen that already, but if you haven't, please take some time to walk around the campus. Someone told me we have 30,000 trees on campus. I haven't counted, but it's certainly some multiple thousand. And we do our best to maintain them and keep them growing. Even when we've had to build new buildings on campus, we've tried to build around the trees wherever possible. So this is a campus where we try to recycle all the water. All the horticulture on campus is done with recycled water. We also have a very good waste sorting and segregation system. We have 70 rainwater harvesting wells on campus and so on. I could go on and on. There's still a long way to go. We have many things to do. But I can assure you that we are at least making a systematic and serious effort to address that issue. This is a wonderful conference that we have had the privilege of co-hosting with the Selco Foundation. I first met Harish about 25 years ago, and I really have treasured my association with him and the foundation. Of course, this conference being at IMB has nothing to do with that particular association. It's part of our institutional collaboration and some of our institutional priorities. And I just thought I'd spend a couple of minutes telling you a little bit about IIM Bangalore in case you're not familiar. So the government started the Indian Institutes of Management in the early 1960s. The purpose of the IIMs was to create good managerial talent and capability for the country, and was expected to complement the talent being created by the leading engineering institutions. Today we have 21 IIMs across the country. IIM Bangalore was the third. We were founded in 1973. We celebrated our Golden Jubilee just a year and a half ago. And over these last 50 years or so, we have more than 25,000 alums who are across India and the globe. Largely, of course, in the corporate sector, because that's what we train them for, but also in government, public policy, the non-profit sector, etc. Our main academic programs are centered around management education. They're largely different variants of the MBA program. But we also have a strong PhD program and a master's in public policy, where we help educate some of the top bureaucrats and administrators in the country. We also, of course, have specialized centers of research, including a Center for Public Policy, a Center for Corporate Governance and Sustainability, and so on. So this is broadly what IIM Bangalore is about: 1,400 students on campus, around 110 faculty, and of course this beautiful oasis here in Bangalore. We all hide inside here and avoid the noise and chaos outside, but I know it's a nice place to take refuge, at least for people who come from outside. Let me just speak for a couple of minutes on the theme itself. So I was just doing one of those simple exercises. I try to find out, using Google and of course ChatGPT, what do they say about why non-profits and big projects fail and so on. And I was amazed by the variety of answers. So it's clear that this whole area of failure and impact is an area where there are lots of possible answers, but I think nobody knows for sure what exactly the reasons are. But when I looked through all that, I did find a few which seemed to resonate with my own experience. So I thought I would just speak briefly about those. One of them is, of course, as a student as well as a professor of strategy, I generally believe that one should be fairly focused on one's mission and vision and try to achieve that. And not surprisingly, a lot of failure of non-profits is attributed to mission creep, because people don't quite stick to what they plan to do, and not surprisingly, the outcomes are also quite different. Another area where we get asked questions often, and I think is very relevant to the non-profit sector, is the whole question of how do you measure performance. And while we tend to measure performance on a whole lot of input parameters like how much money is spent, but we all know, of course, though we can't always do it, that we should be measuring outcomes and impact. So I think the more we can do that, the less we will have the chances of failure, and therefore I think that's another big area to focus on. Third issue which I felt made sense is that while there's a lot of emphasis on fundraising, and of course a lot of the work we do can't happen unless we raise the money to do so, clearly fundraising cannot and should not be just a transactional activity. It needs long-standing relationships with donors, with people who care about the cause, who actually relate to the mission. And I think that's another reason why many programs fail. They don't really succeed in building those long-term relationships with funding agencies. A related issue is reliance on a few donors, essentially some kind of what finance people would call a concentration risk, where you're actually just depending on 2 or 3, and not surprisingly, if their mission or priorities change, you're likely to be in trouble. Founder-centric leadership, especially the inability of founders to sometimes listen to good ideas and from outside, is often another big challenge. And not surprisingly, that could be one of the reasons why many of these initiatives fail, though it could also be the reason for success, because it's the leadership which actually propels the organization forward. And lack of collaboration, I think, is a challenge. I mean, this is something I have myself seen, both among institutions and between institutions and companies, and of course in the nonprofit sector. The more we could actively collaborate, I think the more we would be able to avoid some of the more obvious failures that happen. At the individual level, of course, there are many reasons as well, which we are all very familiar with: poor execution skills, poor communication. Sometimes I find these days especially the impact of the rapid growth and the valuations in the for-profit sector have led to a certain impatience in the non-profit sector, where people are kind of think they also have to scale at the same pace as many of those startups. Sometimes I think that's perhaps misguided, because the same kind of scale is neither possible nor in many cases desirable, and that rapid scaling actually proves to be the undoing of many of these organizations. Particularly since COVID, another thing that's been quite obvious is the need for all of us to be much more sensitive to weak signals outside, to be able to put in place better risk management and contingency plans, perhaps to think more in terms of scenarios than trying to predict the future, because it's perhaps scenario planning which will enable us to walk through different futures better. These are all, I think, obvious issues we need to confront if we want to reduce the probability of failure and succeed on a more consistent basis. So these are just some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you this morning. Once again, let me congratulate the Selco team for putting together this wonderful event. I'm delighted to see such a large audience here. My team failed on one count, though. We were supposed to show you the safety instructions for this hall before we started, so I will do that job instead. There are 4 exits, one at that corner, one at that corner, 2 at the entrances where you came in. So in case of any emergency or fire, please leave through any one of those exits. My request is please don't occupy any of the aisles, and please don't block any of the passageways, because that's an important safety requirement of this hall. Thank you, and have an excellent conference.